Been neither cruel nor kind, Milly had quickly learned that she was nothing. When the old woman had died the next winter, she'd been traded again. These past 2 winters with the woman and the stick had been the worst. Milly knew she wouldn't have lasted much longer. Stick woman had grown tired of having her around and begun to hit harder every day. Now, at 18, Milly faced another change. In her life, change meant things usually got worse, never better. This man of the canyon looked strong enough to kill her with one blow. Not that it mattered. Nothing mattered anymore. Days passed, seasons passed. That whole first year she'd thought her father would come for her, but he hadn't. She remembered seeing her mother dead, face down in the mud the day the Comanche rode onto their farm. Mother was dead, and father never found her. How could he? She moved from tribe to tribe like something worthless shuffled off. After a few years, she'd given up hope and tried to forget about her life before it was too painful to remember. The dark-skinned man with only 2 fingers on one of his hands frowned at her as they rode out of the clearing. The other man, with hair the color of the yellow walls of the canyon, talked as if trying to tell her something. She didn't care where they were going. Away could be no worse. Her new owner smiled at her now and then when he said something, but she didn't know how to answer. For as long as she could remember, any sound she'd made had caused someone in the tribe to hit her. Slowly, the canyon man's words settled her. He never yelled. He wasn't young. The sun had wrinkled the corners of his eyes, but he wasn't old either, because he had all his teeth and rode with the skill of one who had been born to ride. They were long onto the plain flatland when they stopped to camp. The tall man lifted her down from the horse carefully, as if he thought he might hurt her. He looked worried, as though he feared she might try to bolt. He couldn't know that running had been beaten out of her years ago. She stood still and silent in the dark as he built a fire. When he moved her close to the fire, he tried to pull off her blanket, but she held tight. To her surprise, he laughed and gently pushed her to the ground, closer to the fire. The men talked a language she hadn't heard in years. Words drifted around her, reminding her of another life. The canyon man gave her food. She watched him eat his and followed suit. "Spoon," he said, holding up the tool he ate with. "Cup." The dark-skinned man in buckskins shook his head at the canyon man, but he watched her as though considering roasting her on the fire. She didn't like the way the man breathed through his mouth as he glared at her. "Cup," Canyon Man said again as he caught her attention. She didn't answer, but she stored the knowledge away. "James," he said as he patted his chest. "I'm James." She looked away. Inside her mind, she'd remembered her other name before the Apache and Comanche called her names. Sometimes all that kept her sane was whispering Milly in her mind. Milly, she thought as she patted her chest. I'm Milly. But she didn't trust this man enough to say her secret word aloud. The dark-skinned man never spoke to her. He curled up in the shadows to sleep, but James stayed by the fire, his hand resting on his weapon. Milly watched him until he fell asleep. Then she moved closer, so that her blanket almost touched his. She didn't sleep for a long while, waiting to be beaten and made to move away from the fire. Finally he rolled over and looked at her, saying words she didn't understand. His hand reached across the dried grass and patted her mud-covered fingers. Milly closed her eyes. She would not be hurt tonight. Maybe tomorrow, but not tonight.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it. at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.